Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Bethanne, and today I'm doing my April wrap-up. So I actually finished 8 books in the month of April, which kind of surprised me because I was thinking that I hadn't read very many books. But ta-da! So I feel pretty happy with that. The reason I felt like I hadn't read very many books is because I am still working my way through the Count of Monte Cristo, which in my edition is like over 1,400 pages. It's like 1,462, I want to say. And I just cracked 1,000. I'm over 1,000, so huzzah! I had really wanted to finish this in April. I started it at the beginning of March. I'm still going. And this was a group read organized by Summer over at Cozy Reading with Quaker Cats, involving a handful of other awesome booktubers, most of whom have finished this at this point. But I know one person is a little bit behind me still, so I've still got time. Anyways, I've been reading this, and then I've also been reading England's Rare Mosses and Liverworts, which is really fun. It's part sort of part field guide. Like there's a little bit of information about like how to identify the mosses and liverworts, but then the reason why this is readable and why I'm actually reading it is because a lot of the entries for each species are about the conservation threats to the species. So it is just the rare mosses and liverworts, and it describes the sites where they're found, and then it describes some of the history of who was observing the species and when, and then they didn't see it for 100 years, and so that aspect of it is really interesting. So I just read an entry or two a day, and so it's taking me a little while to get through. But anyway, so these 2 books have been taking up a lot of my time without a ton of progress in terms of finishing them. So I will finish them. But anyway, I did finish 8 books in April. So let's go in order. So the first book I finished, I listened to on audio, so I'll throw a picture up, and that was The Killing Moon by N.K. Jemisin, which is the first book. I want to say it's a duology. It's maybe called like the Dream Blood duology. I should have looked that up. Anyway, it's the first book in a 2-book series. And I enjoyed it, but my introduction to Jemisin was the Broken Earth trilogy, and this is not the Broken Earth trilogy. It was really good. I enjoyed it. I think I gave it like 4 stars on Goodreads, but it didn't blow me out of the water like the Broken Earth trilogy did. So the Killing Moon is set on a different planet. There are 2 moons, I think, on this other planet, but then the cultures that our characters are embedded in draw on pretty heavily, in some respects, ancient Egyptian culture from our world. And in particular, there is a magic system that is based around dreaming. And so healers within this, it's part magic, part religion. So healers within this religious society can use sort of the dream energy of people to heal folks. And so you get people kind of donating their dream energy. But then there's also a caste of the priests that are called gatherers, and their task is to gather the spirit of someone who's dying. And that sort of also provides kind of dream energy and magic that can be used by, I think, by the healers. But the thing is that these gatherers, they are ending life. And so most of the way that it's conceptualized in the culture that practices this is, that it's a beautiful way to sort of choose to end your life. And so you get a lot of elderly people that decide to do this, and they're sort of giving back to their society as they depart from the world. So a lot of sick people will do it, etc. But occasionally a gatherer can get sort of twisted and corrupted by this act of taking life. And so the plot of the book is sort of driven through sort of that mechanism. So I won't go any farther because of spoilers, but there's political intrigue because there are 2 countries that share a border, and some of the gatherers, who are our main characters, get sucked up into this political intrigue, and there's a female ambassador, and they're trying to stop a war. So it's very intense. So it was really good, but it just wasn't as deep and impactful as Broken Earth. It almost read, I clearly haven't looked up a lot about this book, so I assume it's classified as adult fantasy. But it did almost read a little bit more YA, if that sort of makes sense. So just kind of the way that the story was constructed and the pacing of the action and things like that. Yeah, just wasn't quite what I was expecting from Jemisin. So that was that. Okay. The second book I finished is Breach of Peace by Daniel B. Greene. So a booktuber. This month I read 2 books published by booktubers. This is Daniel's first novel. It's a novella, and this is part of, I believe, an intended trilogy of novellas that are setting up his intended giant fantasy book, I guess. He's got grand plans. And this was really fun. So this is fantasy. It's kind of urban-ish fantasy, takes place in a city. And it's an interesting fantasy because they have guns, but it is definitely a fantasy world, and some magic comes into it at the end. We follow an inspector. Clid is the main character. Excuse me, and then 2 of her fellow inspectors, her husband and her husband's sort of rival within the police department. And they're investigating a murder, and it turns out that the murder is a lot more than it seems. And in the course of investigating the murder, they start to stumble onto some state secrets, some conspiracy type stuff, some hidden magical drama is part of that, and things kind of blow up in their faces in a couple different ways. So this was really enjoyable. I think it was perfect as a novella. It definitely reads as a first book. Hopefully you all know what I mean by that. It was definitely well written. That's for sure. It doesn't have major structural problems or problems with the characterizations or anything. And it was really interesting. I actually technically read this in one sitting. I read it in an hour and a half car ride from here up to a campground closer to northern Minnesota, and that was like a great way to spend the car ride. I didn't want to put it down. Like, I wanted to know what happened, because since it has that detective story energy, you're really sort of pulled along with the plot, and you really want to know what happens with these characters, because from the very beginning, something scary is gonna happen, because it is very dark. So enjoyed it. Very much looking forward to the next books. I will read them. So that was Daniel B. Greene's book. All right, then all the rest of the books that I finished in April, I have either already talked about or am going to talk about. So I will just, in their own videos. So I'll just run through those quickly. So next I read Maurice by E.M. Forster. I read that on my Kindle. And that, of course, is a classic story. It was sort of the coming of age and coming into self of a young gay man in England at the turn of or just after the turn, early 20th century, whatever that time period was. And I loved that. There was, of course, drama and romance and passion, and lack of passion in this one idiotic character. But overall, it was just it was queer joy, and I really loved it. Then next, I read Gathering Moss by Robin Wall Kimmerer, who is also the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, which I had read a few months ago. In that book, she uses moss as sort of the organizing theme to explore a lot of biology, and then in her pretty signature style, some personal aspects creep into all of her essays. So it was a really accessible way to actually learn, or in my case, kind of relearn some basic biology and basic facts about moss, but also just told in this gorgeous nature writing style that really wove in a lot of her own sort of personal anecdotes and viewpoints. So I really enjoyed that. And then A Good Provider is One Who Leaves is the next book that I read by Jason DeParle, and that is a piece of sort of journalistic writing. So he was able to sort of build relationships with a family in the Philippines starting in the 80s, and then following different members of that family through their experiences of migration. So of being sort of migratory workers leaving the Philippines to go work in various places around the globe, primarily in the Middle East, and then one of the members of the family, I keep wanting to say characters, but these are real people. One of the members of the family is able to successfully migrate to the United States with her family as a nurse. And so a lot of the book, maybe about half the book, really centers on sort of her story and all the struggles that she went through to sort of make that happen for herself and her family. So that was really great as well. And Gathering Moss and A Good Provider is One Who Leaves I covered in one video. I sort of talked about them at the same time. So all the links to these videos will be down below. Then A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik, which is a YA fantasy that was published last year and is sort of a dark twist on the magical school aspect. So in that one, magical kids with magical potential are sort of always under constant threat by beings called Maleficaria, and so many of them die, even in the protection of their families, that a school was constructed that just sort of sucks all the kids into it, and it's just a total black box. Nothing can get in, there are no teachers. There's only one weak point because the kids have to be able to get out at the end, which is called the graduation hall. And so the kids sort of spend all of their time is learning spells, learning how to be witches or magic users. I can't quite remember if the word witch is used, but anyway, being magic users, and sort of building their power, and then they have to fight their way out at the end. So that was a really fun book. I really, really enjoyed it. There also has been some controversy about that book for a number of different aspects about it that I cover in my review video about it, just my personal opinions about those things. But those things were not enough to convince me not to read the book. So I did think carefully about whether to read the book, decided that on the balance I wanted to read it, and read it and really loved it. So. Okay, then next was my second booktuber book, which was Memories Hostage by Margaret Pinard, which is a mystery set in England and a bit in Scotland in, oh gosh, now I'm forgetting, like 1873, am I getting that right? Late 19th century, and that one was lovely and fun. I mean, the setting is amazing. It's Britain. There were some fun, surprising twists in the mystery. I kind of went into it thinking like, oh, it'll be Jane Austen. I forgot it was a mystery, or that sort of British story, and it was not. It was a lot more. I don't want to say interesting, but like it was fun to have sort of those curveballs thrown at me. So definitely enjoyed that one as well. And then the final book that I read in the month of April is called The Stars and the Blackness Between Them by Junauda Petrus-Nasah, and she is born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I currently live. But she is of Caribbean ancestry and African ancestry. And her book was amazing. So it's a YA novel. It's a queer novel. It follows two girls who are, oh, and I'm forgetting their age. I think they're 16, 17. But the story sort of starts in Trinidad because one of the characters starts in Trinidad. The other character is born and raised in Minneapolis, and the character in Trinidad, Audrey, is sort of sent by her family to Minneapolis. It's a love story. There's some tragedy that happens sort of throughout the book, but is like, it's just the most amazing book for just constant joy, even when sad things are happening. Like these two girls just have so much power, and their friends have so much power, and it's an amazing book about love and community, and joy, and sort of what it means to be human, honestly. So I really, really love that book, and I am going to try to talk coherently about it in its own video because it really deserves its own video. So if any of that intrigues you, please be on the lookout for that. It's the sort of book that, like, I would have died if I could have read it in high school. I would have just, like, been like, freeze me in time right now at the end of this book. This is the only second of my life that I ever want to live. And even as an adult, like, I still sort of felt that way. Yeah, and like I said, it is YA, but it's dealing with big enough topics, and the main characters are mature enough that it really sort of captures the, as an adult, it was like, I can see the especially in the construction of the book, like it does read like a YA novel, but I really felt like I could identify with the characters, even though they're teenagers, because it sort of captured the simplicity that teenagers can have when they look at really tough stuff, and they're just like, there's an obvious answer here. And adults are like, oh, but what if, but, like, we get paralyzed by indecision, and we're thinking about shit. And they can keep an eye on what really matters. Yeah, as an adult, I loved it. Anyway, like I said, I'll try to talk coherently about it. So anyway, I think that wraps up my month of reading, April. So I think that was a pretty good month for me. If you've read any of these books, I would love to hear what you thought. And if you'd like to read any of these books, I would love to know when you do. So let me know if you're planning to. And I will see you on the next video. Thanks. Bye.